So a common challenge with layout and design is often artwork that comes from Word, Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, bringing it into InDesign. And whether it's low resolution or high resolution, so forth and so on. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So when you're placing images from Word, I'm sure many of you could relate to this, but anyway, you see it's very low resolution. Okay, so the question is, what part of this should we recreate? And it really depends on budget, and caliber of project, because some really high-end projects are worthy of redoing them completely. For example, you could take, and I don't want to say easily because it's not easy to do this, but you could take a snapshot of word art like so, and you can drag that into an Adobe Illustrator document like this. And I won't spend a lot of time on it just to show you what it is. And then you have to go in and you have to zoom in and redraw these rectangles. They're slightly rounded, and you can see where we're going with this, where it's like, all right, it's a lot of work to do, but sometimes it's worth it and sometimes it's not. But see, having to redraw all these lines will take time. But if it's a high caliber project and it's a really important project, it might be worth the time to recreate this drawing, but it just takes a lot of time. So instead of doing that, sometimes I create a hybrid approach where, for example, you have text like this, where it says like meeting 110. Where the heck is it? There. That's pretty easy in InDesign to reset that, especially when there's repetitive stuff like meeting rooms and such. And so what you do is you'll create a text document, or not a text document, a text box. Where are we here? Sometimes a little tricky. Um, we're going to create a text box. Yeah, see, sometimes, oh my gosh. Sometimes in InDesign it gets a little tricky, but you want to create a box and do meeting. Oops, can't even spell meeting 109. Okay. And then we're going to center it. And this particular document, it's all Arial, right? We want to make sure we use the same font. So we're going to grab this text box, we're going to highlight it, and then we're going to go over here. We're going to change it to Arial. Let's see. We're just gonna do Arial, probably Arial bold because it is a bold font, and it's gonna be approximately 6 points, probably a little bit less than that. We'll adjust the leading. You can see we're playing around with this. Okay, it's already on paragraph settings. That's why it's doing this. There we go. So then what we're gonna do is we're gonna zoom in and always zoom into your work, especially when it comes to artwork, because it's just easier to see it. And we're going to try to replicate this as best we can. So actually 6 points isn't bad. Sometimes you can actually do increments like 5.7. Depends how how exact you want to be. You can see the tracking here is off, so we're going to set that a little bit, tighten these letters up a little bit here, the leading, so the distance between the lines there, like that. And you can see it's not jet black, which this particular client doesn't do, as you know. But we'll go over here. Let's do the dark. Let's do dark gray. Yeah. Okay. So there's meeting 109. Now see the difference in resolution? Really, really sharp because it's actual font, right? As opposed to on the right side, it's pixelated because it's from a Word graphic. And what I mean by the hybrid approach is that you can you can create a hybrid. You don't have to spend all the time redrawing the drawing, but you can certainly redo the text work. You can see that didn't take a lot of work. So what I do is I center it up here on the top here. I put this centered in the box like this. And then what I do is I'm sort of creating a mask by taking the background here and changing it to paper or white. See? And it basically covers over the old stuff. And then what I do is I would mimic this. I would copy it. And here's meeting 110. You just have to be really careful because what happens is, let's say I did this and see how it's covering over the green circles. And again, you could do the green circles, but that becomes cumbersome because it's actually part of the drawing, and that's where this gets sticky. So you have to decide what's worth changing, what's not worth changing. Now, one thing I like to do is I like to go back to the client and I'll say, hey, can we get the original artwork that was created for this? And often it's a PDF file or an Adobe Illustrator file or something we can work with, but chances are it's not. So I'm just showing you the hybrid approach. So again, copying and moving this down here and then over here and being careful, making sure that you make the right edits because, it's just always a good idea. Sometimes we're in a rush. We got to get things done quickly, which is great, but why not? So this making sure these things line up like that. But see, then what I'll do is I'll take the text like this. I'll do this, and I'll hold my Shift key down, and I'll grab this, this, and this, all elements, and I'll group them together. See, so it's all together. So you can see the difference now, where it's pixelated versus not pixelated and making sure it's clean, making sure everything's centered kind of nicely or whatever to a certain extent. And that definitely will make a sharper graphic using that hybrid approach. So that's probably the best idea. I mean, you can see I did that here. See on the right here, this 4 fan coil units right here. This actually, look at this. I'll slide it over. This used to be part of that old graphic. See that? Where it was low resolution. See, it was all grainy. So I recreated these green boxes to do that, to achieve that hybrid effect. So that's how you do that. And that's probably a good solution for a lot of these graphics throughout this document. Even things like this. This was completely redone. But I know there are a couple of other charts in here that probably could stand to be reconfigured the same way. Yeah, like this one here. You can see what I did here was this here, this key down here, I redid it. See on the right side, the original is right here. And that's the challenge is that again, Word has a different color structure altogether, right? So this is actual hardcore colors. They're actual colors over here. Whereas Word just sort of guesses the color. It's not completely accurate. So what I did there was I recreated that. And this here there's a white box masking over the old stuff. So what we'll probably do, or what I'll probably do now, is go in and there's a few other things. Like, see the dates? I can probably replicate those. In fact, I can replicate those pretty quickly. But it gets sticky because where does it end? Where do you stop? Do you do the numbers over here on the left? Do you do the occupancy count? Probably the answer is yes, because then it will look more high resolution. So it's the same kind of thing here, where you take this and you write occupancy count. You can see where the more you do this stuff, the more room there is for error. Okay, but if the objective is to make this more high resolution, I'm centering it. This is certainly one way to do that. Trying to use, their colors. Let's use sky blue and let's go over here to Arial. We want all of the fonts throughout to be Arial. We want it to be the same. And again, it's Arial bold. And then what we'll do is we'll turn it here. Yeah, and sometimes you'll see in Word they use these wacky colors that don't exist in the client's color palette. So we come as close as we can, and this is where it gets sticky, right? Because now it doesn't match the rest of the colors. So that's always a question, like how far should we go? And the old term, opening up a can of worms. Sometimes that's what we're doing is opening up a can of worms because now you've started this process. So for example, here, let me put this backdrop in white and slide this over here. See, already it's like different, and which is okay, I guess. I mean, I personally think wait, but look at this. See, occupancy count here is in this same color that we made over here. So I'm actually headed in the right direction because I used SE Sky Blue for the color, and we'll do the same thing here. Probably a good idea now that I'm looking at this because occupancy count should kind of match across the board. However, the line here, the actual lines, you can see they're going to be low resolution unless they're recreated. Recreating this particular chart is going to be a nightmare because there's no sharp point to go to. It can be done roughly, but I would say, hey, let's get the original from the client and or at least the original Excel files to work with. But again, that's going to take more work. So again, what I think is a hybrid effect here, and that's what I'm going to do here. Sometimes to move quicker, I do this. I replicate that, turn it sideways. Again, not using black. We're going to use dark gray. Change this to Jan 22nd. We're centering it. It is centered already. They don't have to be too big, but remember, it's masking over the old one. And we want to come close in size, right? So you can actually do it manually too, like this, so it's just sort of roughly in place. And then, you're going to do the same thing. So what I do is I replicate, and then I change this to 4 and this to 3. And you can see it's like you got to be careful, where it's placed, right underneath the graphic, just like it is. See the smart guides right here? Turns into an arrow. That helps, but it isn't accurate, right? Because InDesign's saying that this is the exact same distance between those two, but I don't want it there because where it really goes is here. I want to follow where the graphic was, the original graphic. So that's what I mean by being careful and opening up a can of worms because, the deeper we go with this, and even with hybrid solutions like this, sometimes it starts other things. And a client might look at it and say, well, why is this color? And why is this shape? Well, because we're literally creating a hybrid solution. So check it out. So see in here, January 26th, look at the old one. See how pixelated and quote unquote low resolution that looks? Well, by adding the dates like this, it's going to just be a little bit sharper. And I think that's a reasonable solution to use the background graphic as it is, as it's imported, because we don't have the original, and then redoing as much type as possible. I might leave the side quadrant stuff alone because that's sort of I don't know, it's kind of a pain in the neck to do those. And it is kind of part of the graphic. You want the numbers to line up perfectly. But this one here, VOC PPB, right here, we have this color here, which is dark gray. It's actually dark gray 72% because it kind of matches this. It isn't 100%. So 72. So remember that. So now what we'll do is come over here and change this to VOC PPB. And we're going to make that the dark gray 72%. Remember? So it matches. And yeah, again, can of worms, right? Like, why not go 100%? Well, because these lines are not 100%. They're actually closer to 72%. That's why it's set that way. But putting it there at least, again, makes it a little bit more high resolution. And that to me is the ideal solution here with this. And there's probably one, two, three, there's probably about a well, there's a small handful, as you know, of these graphics. And I'm going to do the same thing to all of them. So the hybrid effect is probably the best solution here to come up with something that's a little more high resolution, but isn't going over the top and redoing the graphics entirely. So that's what I highly recommend.